tuition, dental work, and theater tickets.
There you go. Some expenses there by Rep. Duncan Hunter, a California Republican, and Congresswoman Claudia Tenney on the phone with us as well. I know the county chair's meeting last night to interview 9 potential candidates to run in Chris Collins' seat, and he was indicted on insider trading charges and announced days later that he would have he's going to suspend his reelection campaign. And just want to get your thoughts on that, Claudia. I know there's been conversation out there. We've had folks ask us if you received money from Chris Collins' campaign and if you would return it. I don't know if that's an issue for you or if you see this being an issue. But both Chris Collins and Duncan Hunter, they came out early for the president in support of him. So I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that or if they're being targeted, if you have any belief that they might be targeted because of their support for the president.
I think that's part of it. The thing with Chris Collins has been around. He was cleared, from what I understand, by the Congressional Ethics Committee, which is pretty tough. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the Southern District of New York was handed over to them, and they went after him. He did the right thing for now. It's too much. Really, the big issue is Chris's son was also indicted, and so it seems to me that there's more on the son than on Chris. And Chris says he has a defense, and he's been indicted. He hasn't been convicted. And he claims, and he wrote, to all of us in the New York delegation to give us advance notice that it was happening, and said that he was going to be fighting it, and then he also said that, that he would be, vindicated. So
just so people listening know what we're talking about, he is the one who sits on a pharmaceutical company board. Got wind that they had not been approved for a drug, let his son know. His son dumped his stock. I think his son's father-in-law, they dumped their stock. The stock dropped, and he's accused of providing insider information in violation of SEC rules.
Right. And
so
also,
people know what we're talking
the
about.
The SEC didn't, but the reason that I believe that the Congressional Ethics Committee didn't find it to be insider trading is because that information that they didn't get the contract was published on an international exchange. That news was out. It was public before Chris said anything. So that's what he claims, and that's all I really know about the case. Personally, I like Chris. It's too bad that this is happening to him and his family. He was, he was an interesting guy to know. I don't know him real well, but I know him. I liked him. He's another person who's quite personable. With Duncan Hunter, I know him. He served as a Marine. I don't know him real well either. I've heard that there were a lot of marital problems and financial issues, and that he got divorced and his wife was using the campaign account as well. I don't know. These are all things that the courts have to determine. I do think it's pretty interesting that these things have been floating around for a long time, and nothing happens until right before Election Day. So I'm sure there's all kinds of people, again, that could or should be prosecuted that aren't getting prosecuted. And they look like they did. It looks like they got indicted for legitimate things, but you have to question that it's right before Election Day. They could have indicted Chris Collins last year. This has been out for a long time. He went through a very exhaustive congressional ethics probe all year long, since I got, at least for over a year, at least. And I remember when I first got elected, they were talking about this. If it turns out that Chris is not exonerated, we will certainly return the money. But, Anthony Brindisi has accepted $1 million from Ray Halberter, who is the world's biggest tax cheat, or at least the United States is, as far as I know, the biggest tax cheat in the nation. And he's funneling it through Nancy Pelosi's super PAC to give him money. He accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars from Sheldon Silver to run his campaign in 2011 through the Democratic, Assembly campaign committee account. All these things are non-transparent ways of getting money to a candidate. And so, yeah, you can go, I haven't seen him returning any of that cash, nor has he returned cash from other people who have nefarious backgrounds. So, look, if something happens to Chris Collins, it's $3,000. It's not a big deal. We'll get the money back. But I just feel like I don't want to be ambushed and have this used against me over $3,000. Mm-hmm. I think it's silly.
Total raised from the campaign the other day with the president and the fundraiser? Do you have an idea?
I don't know what the total amount is. We'll find out. It was from what I'm hearing, we did better. The money is still coming in, so we don't really have a final number, but it's going to be a decent amount. I'm shocked, actually.
Yeah, well,
people really appreciated the opportunity to see the president and to be in Utica. A lot of them took advantage of the opportunity. It's not often that you get to sit at a round table with the president. So.
Congresswoman Claudia Tenney joining us here on the Talk of the Town this morning, Talk 100.7 FM. I think Rocco wants to switch gears a little bit and ask you about another recent story in the news.
Yeah, I'm sure you're aware this happened out in Iowa. This Molly Tibbetts, as President Trump referred to her, as this beautiful, lovely girl she's 20 years old, I believe, 24 maybe. She was killed out in Iowa. And a legal immigrant from Mexico who had been in the country illegally for a number of years apparently confessed to it. But was interesting in the story, and you haven't heard it talked about too much, is that he was working for a number of years. Craig Lang, he was working on a farm, and that was the former 2018 Republican candidate for Secretary of Agriculture in Iowa. And I just wanted to read something that struck me as interesting. It said that this immigrant who was in the country illegally was working for the farm in good standing, and but the farm noted that Rivera is the name of the immigrant. He passed the government's E-Verify employment verification system despite his status as an undocumented immigrant. The system is intended to maintain a database of I-9 forms and tax records of employees across the country. So as I read that, my question would be, if this guy slipped through the E-Verify system, what's the point of the E-Verify system if that's being used or argued that could potentially help deal with the illegal immigration issue as far as businesses and farms are concerned? And that's something I think when you talk about building the wall and immigration reform, you don't really hear too much talk about E-Verify in terms of its impact on the problem, if businesses are opposed to it or farms are opposed to it. But the bottom line is that apparently this illegal immigrant got through the E-Verify system, and it resulted in ultimately this young woman's death. So do you have any thoughts on that issue just in general, but specifically in terms of the E-Verify and if it really needs to be looked at, if it really would work as intended, and do you believe that should be an important part of the immigration reform discussion?
Well, E-Verify, of course, was a huge topic of discussion in Goodlet, too. So if you think back to earlier this year, we had two large immigration bills, Goodlet 1, and then there was another bill that came through that Goodlet 1 was considered a little more conservative. Goodlet 2 was another version of the Bob Goodlatte bill that was had a little bit more leeway and a little more, I would say, allowed more immigrants to come in under the numbers that were under the numbers that the president put forth in his State of the Union. Remember, the president said that we'd like to see 1.8 million DACA, so-called DACA children with their relatives get citizenship, not become legal residents as Barack Obama did, but actually give them citizenship is what he offered, and the Democrats turned it down. E-Verify was the whole reason many people cited that they did not vote for Goodlet 2. The more conservative members said, we're not voting for Goodlet 2 because there's no E-Verify in it. And the truth is, as you're stating, is E-Verify nothing is really the end all. I mean, how we got through E-Verify, people are pretty clever these days. There's a lot of ways to get around things. So I think it's a multiple part test that we have to go through. I mean, the president, we need workers. We need people that want to work. We also need to remember that I think we need people who want to become Americans, people who care about freedom, who want to assimilate into the life that we created as American citizens based on our founding fathers' vision. And I think that we bring in more legal immigrants than any country in the world. And we probably also bring in more illegal immigrants, people who are just coming to this country, many for good intentions and many not. And I think it's just a multi-pronged approach, and it just shows you we still have to come up with some kind of immigration, and the president's determined to do that. It's something that nobody has been able to really accomplish for a long time.
But if an E-Verify system gets constructed and put in place that is as strong as, in theory, people are saying it should be, could that ultimately hurt businesses and farmers in order to employ individuals that where part of this discussion you have a lot of people say, well, those are the ones that go and work on the the farms and pick the fruits and the vegetables or do the kind of labor that apparently Americans don't want to do. So if an E-Verify system really was in place that was strict enough to show if someone was illegal or not, is that something that businesses and farmers would resist?